Hello and welcome. What we're going to do here is just go over the manipulating strings notes that we got to before the end of or beginning of spring break, and then we'll look at the rest of it there. So again, we've got a lot of experience with working with strings. This was just sort of solidifying our understanding. The first little bit here that we'll just run into was, issues with if we've got single quotes, double quotes, and the use of triple quotes, and also the escape characters. So if we're looking at something like this, right, this is Andrew's phone. Obviously, the issue we run into if we're using single quotes, we've got an apostrophe that acts as a quote, and then that causes this string sort of to end. So obviously, the best way to get around that is just simply using double quotes. That's generally what I do. Now, you can also use escape characters, right? And those are the backslashes. And we sort of talked about these ones. If you want to use a single quote, you could use the backslash single quote, backslash double quote, and so on. And they give a couple other things too, like new lines, using the backslashes, and using the tab. Now the backslash is an interesting one, which we'll talk a little bit about in a second with the raw string, because we use that often for paths and so on. So that's sort of what leads next. Just looking here, right, just some examples. Obviously, backslash n gives you that new line, so that's why those two are on new lines there. Backslash tab, it tabbed it in a little bit, and then the backslash apostrophe, right, or single quote, so it ran it just as a single quote despite it, or sorry, as an apostrophe, despite it being inside single quotes there. Now the raw strings, when we start to open files and things like that, it becomes more important, but the R just ignores basically all, like it says, all escape characters and so on, and prints as backslashes as regular. And so that's very useful when you're trying to do paths, okay? And yeah, I mean, it's not so much important in this section, but later on when you're trying to open files, it is. Multi-line strings. So if you want to have, press enter and be able to go down more than one line, then you can either use triple single quotes or triple double quotes. So in this case, I've used triple single quotes, and my letter to Santa here, asking for my Commodore 64. You can obviously see that that allows me to press enter, have a new line, and it's still all within that, right? So when I printed that out, it keeps basically the spacing as well, which is interesting, and also those new lines, okay? So something useful. Obviously, I could work that out with, backslashes on the escape characters for new lines and so on, and so I recreated it here using that idea. So yeah, I mean, whatever you want to do, this is obviously a little bit easier to type out if you're going to definitely do double, spacing and so on, whereas this takes a little bit more work, but you can accomplish the same thing. Okay, multi-line comments, sort of, we use the hashtag mark, right, to do a comment. You could also do a comment when you've got triple quotes, okay? So this multi-line comment, it can actually pull things away. Oftentimes you'll see this right at the top of a function to define what the function does. Again, useful there. Moving into indexing and slicing. So again, very much like a list, all the items, all the letters, all the characters, including spaces and punctuation, are signified or denoted by a index value, starting from 0, going into the end. And just like it was in lists, we can identify or print out or grab a specific character or sets of characters using those index values. So if we use 0, obviously it grabs the first one. -1, don't forget, that counts from the back. So whereas this is 11, it is also identified as -1. So the -1 finds the exclamation mark. You can do a sort of a slice there. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, not including 5. So that's why it just goes up to hello with the O. It doesn't include the empty space there. And then obviously you can go for the same thing. If you don't put the first one, it defaults to the first one. And if you don't put the last one, it defaults to the end. All right? So no different than lists there, okay? And obviously you can save it to that, right? print it out. You can iterate through, okay, again, just very much like a list. So for each letter in spam, and then if the letter is equal to 0, print that letter, or sorry, is letter to O, print that letter. Actually, I've gotten rid of that at the moment, but you could, you know, if I push this in, I guess, just bring that up. Right, so if the letter is O, it would print the letter. So if I ran this, it won't print them all. The letter, sorry, haha. 6 o'clock in the morning. There we go. So it just printed out the two O's there, the O from world and the O from hello. Okay, so yeah, depending on what you want to do, I mean, lots of things there. In and not in, again, very much similar with lists, right? You can check to see if it's in or not in. Capitalization, of course, matters, right? So hello in hello world, this line here, it's true because it's capitalized. However, if it's lowercase, it's not. What's kind of interesting here is a empty string in hello. In Python, it says it's true. Cats, not in cats and dogs. Again, it's sort of the negative there, so it's false because cats is in dogs and cats. Okay. String methods. So these are things that check on the data, right, on the specific string. They only work on strings, and so what they're looking for here is upper, lower, and then is upper and is lower. These two, whenever you have an is in front, are often booleans, are definitely booleans, so they will return true and false. These ones will return a string either in full uppercase or in full lowercase. So I've got spam hello world, spam dot lower, so it's going to return all of these, change them basically. So this new spam has the same hello world, but all set to lowercase. We talked about it for, you know, for sort of answer verification. So if someone typed in the word yes, we can change it all to lower, right, by doing it here, and then just check it against one, so you don't have to have all those possible checks. That's what sort of we looked at, okay? So it makes things a lot easier. Right, and that's what I said, it's just helping reduce that input error, okay? So we don't have to worry about all the possibilities of capitalization. We can just get it all to, say, lowercase or all to uppercase, and we can deal with that. These is upper and is lower, right? We're just checking, so we've got hello world. Is lower returns false because it's not all lower, okay? So if you have a mix of either one, it's going to return false, okay? If you did ABC 1, 2, 3, okay, this is going to be lower. It only looks at the cases, okay? If you just have numbers, it doesn't look at that. I mean, I could do, just to make sure here, if I did this uppercase, whatever, okay, if I press Shift Enter, then that turns to true, okay, and that's just simply because those are all true. Obviously, if I make one of these lowercase, it goes back to false there because all of them have to be either uppercase or lowercase to make is upper true or is lower true, but it ignores punctuation or numbers, okay? Obviously, you can string some together, okay? Hello, change it to upper, then change it to lower if you want, right? Change it all to lower, and obviously if you check it, then it is going to be true. And you can't obviously do this because what it's doing here is it's changing this into a Boolean, so it becomes false in this case. And you can't change false because false is, even though it's characters, it's not really a Boolean, or sorry, it's not really a string, right? It's a Boolean. So that's why this is false, because like I said here, it's a Boolean. Okay. And so the other one here is the isString methods. And so there's a bunch of them: is alpha, is alnum, is decimal, is space, is title. I would say is title is probably useless. Is space might be, and these other ones are good for, again, input validation. We'll see an example below. So the best thing to do is just play around with them. So obviously hello, and then if you're checking to see if it is alpha, that means if it is letters, only letters, and not blank. And so yeah, that's true. Obviously, if I put a put an exclamation mark or something like that, right, it becomes false. So it can only be letters, and you can see here too, if you put numbers, it goes false, okay? So alpha has to be alpha, right? It has to be just alphabetical number or letters. If you do alnum, right? So alphanumeric, you can think of it. So it's looking for both characters and numbers. Then alnum, 1, 2, 3. So hello, 1, 2, 3 on that is going to be true, okay? But however, if I do put, say, an exclamation mark or any other sort of punctuation, and I run that, you can see that third one's become false. So it's just looking for numbers and letters, basically. Is alnum. Now, this again, it's, if you look here, is alnum if it's and or numbers or letters. So yeah, it's going to be true here, as you can see. If it was just numbers, it would also be true because it is, numbers. Decimal checks to make sure that it is only decimal, okay? So it says that is decimal, checks to see if it's true, if it's only numeric characters. One interesting thing, I think, is that if you do like, and then I put in a decimal there, so this one, yeah, it switched to false there. So it can't even have a decimal in it. Obviously, you could have a $sign or anything like that. So a little bit, you have to be a little bit careful there. Obviously, spaces, checking to see if it consists only of spaces, tabs, new lines, okay? So I guess that should be, oops, that should be bold as well there. Let me just fix that. There we go. Good. So that should be also spaces, right? So yeah, that's one's there. Maybe not as useful, but if you're looking to see if it's blank or if it does have a space, that could be useful. This here, I don't see really the point of it, checking to see if it's a title. The reason is every word has to be capitalized. And in a title, not all letters are capitalized, like especially for smaller words. So in this case, this is title case is actually false. It doesn't make any grammatic sense, but if I change that to A, I mean, you'd never capitalize the A, right? It says it's false. So I don't really see the usefulness of this at the moment, but it is there. It is a is-X string method. So taking a look at how this might use it, right? Like I said, using it for input validation, you want them to put their age in. And remember, we had that trouble where we were trying to change it into an integer so we could do maybe some comparisons. And if they didn't put in a number, we had problems. Well, here's a way to get rid of it, or solve that problem. So if we just check to see that their input is decimal. If it's not, we break it and they just keep entering their age. Or sorry, we break it, and then if it is decimal, then we can go on to the program. If not, we keep just asking their age so that you don't have to worry about, casting a text right into an integer and causing our program to crash. So you just make sure it's a decimal value. Same thing here, password. Let's just say you can't have any special characters. You can only have letters and numbers. Again, we can just check if it's alnum. If it is, it breaks and we can continue with our program. Otherwise, we just keep asking them to put that password in. So yeah, very useful when you're trying to do that. Okay, next one starts with and ends with string methods. So the join and split methods, just like they sound, the join will join together, say, a list of items and put them into a string, and the split one will take a string and split them based on whatever sort of delimiter that you want. So let's just look at the join first. So the join method, pretty straightforward. So what we've got is what we're going to join it with. So in this case, I've got a comma and a space. Below here is just a space. And the next one is ABC for some reason. Okay, then I've got my list. So the dot join, and then it's called on, the method's called on a list. So we're going to join cats rats, and bats, these three items, and we're going to join them, make into a string, and we're going to separate them by that comma space. So you can see right here when I ran it, now instead of a list, I get a string, and it says cats, comma space, rats, comma space, bats. And it doesn't do the last one. Smart enough not to do the last one. Same thing here with the join with the space. So again, these are just 4 words that are there. My name is Simon, and then we've got that separated by spaces. If I did not put anything in there, so if I just did that, right, then you have no space, so nothing's there, okay? So that's what this is doing in front. It's just putting it in between each one. And you can actually see that easy when you put ABC in there, right? Now it's filling that space up with ABC. Not too useful, but you can obviously see if you had a string or whatever and you want to separate it by commas, or you wanted to separate with spaces, like basically a string inside the list, you could do that, right? Another one here, sort of the opposite, is splitting it. So if you've got a string now, so here is my string, okay? By default, the delimiter, what it's going to separate it based on is the space, okay? So if you don't have, if you've got spaces, you know you want to separate by the space, you don't have to put anything into here, into the, in sort of the parameter. So you've got my name is Simon, and so it splits it based on that, so you end up with 4 items in your list, okay? Like I said, it's going to default by the white space, okay? Either by the space, the tab, or the new line characters. But you can put in a delimiter. So in this case here, I've got, you know, if I did this, so I've got my, and I've got ABC in between them all, okay? And I've done the split. Well, if I tried to do that, it's looking for white space. There's no white space, so it's not going to split it. However, if I put in there the string ABC as my delimiter, and I rerun this, wherever it saw ABC, it removes that, and it separates out each word, okay, as a separate item in your new string here, okay? So this delimiter, by default, will be white space. If you need something else, you can set it, okay? Another one here, same idea. We've got a multi-line string, okay? So something about a milk experiment, not drinking it. And what we're doing here is just going to create a list, okay? Again, a list of items, as you can see here, and the delimiter here is the new line. So wherever there's a new line, so after the comma, after I am fine, you start that new item, okay? So you could use it that way as well. The next part here is about justifying text, and justifying means sort of moving to the left, to the right, or to the center. So rjust is right justified, so all the text is to the right, L is left justified, and center obviously being centered. So take a little look at these ones here. So I've got hello rjust, okay, so there's my method, and I've got 10. Now what that 10 represents is the number of basically spaces. And it's hard to see here because it's white, but this would be basically hello has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so this would have 5 spaces plus the 5 here to give you 10. Okay, so what it is I mean, if I went this to 5 here, just to show you, there's no indentation at all because the 5 is taken up by the hello characters. Okay, if I go 6, it's just going to be 1 over, okay? And so 10 means basically however many, you count how many these are up, how many are left, then it will space it over, okay? You can see here with 20, obviously it's a bit further. So there's 5, 10, 15, and then this is the remaining 20. If you've got hello world, right justified, ooh, how did I get 210? That's why it's on a separate line there. Let's do that again. There it is. So hello world, depending on how many that is, if we subtracted this, obviously it's over 5, but a little less than 10 there, okay? Right justification, sorry, left justification, hard to tell, because what there is there's actually spaces here that have been put, and you can actually see it when I highlight it, and it matches up with that. but it's just pushed it to the left side, okay? And then there's 10 characters in total. They're making that up. Now, you can do a little bit of a thing to actually see those things rather than spaces. Again, by default, it shows the spacing is done by spaces, but you can put different characters in there. So in this case, I'm right justifying it by 20, and I can put that asterisk in, and so now you can see that there's all that, so there'd be 15 asterisks plus the 5 there, obviously with the dashes. I think I meant to do this as a left justified. And you can see there now, same length, right? Because they have to add up to the same 20, but we've got dashes onto the right side here. When we left justify, so we bring this over to the left, we fill the right, the rest of it with in this case, the dash, okay? So either it will default to spaces if you don't put anything there, or you can choose your own character, okay? And we'll see a little example here where it can, just format things nicely. Center, same idea. So I've got hello. So hello would take up 5, and then on each side of that, we got to divide 15 by 2. So you're going to have 7 and 8. Okay, and you can kind of see that better here. So I think we're going to have 7 on that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yep, there's 7. And on this side, there should be 8. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yep, there's 8. So 7 plus 8 plus 5 gives you the 20. Okay, just center it out there. So an example, where would you might use this? Well, we want to sort of print nicely this picnic list. So what we do is take in 3 things: the item length, the left width, and the right width. We'll see that in a second. So there's 3 parameters, okay? It's going to print, always print out picnic items. It's going to center it, and remember, this is where it's going to center. So it's going to add the left and the right widths, okay? And then put whatever, picnic items in the middle. And then it is going to put dashes on each side. And you can see that right here, okay? So we've got those ones there. And then what it's going to do is it's going to run through each one. So for K, key and value, so we've got keys of the items of food, and then the values, we've got those as the number of items we're bringing. And so it's going to run through those, and we're going to put them on the same line. So we're printing it out. The key, we're going to left justify it, so move it all the way to the left, and then sort of put whatever the left width is, or whatever we've defined it, and then put dots all the way, and then we're going to add or concatenate on the string of V, so we had to change that number into a string to print it out, okay, because that's going to be the value 4, 12, or whatever. And we're going to right justify that, so we're going to move it all the way to the right based on the right width, okay, and no characters or anything, just going to be spaces, okay. So if we look at this when we print it out, so I'm running that function on the dictionary. The 12 is the left width, 5 is the right width. So what we can see here, this would be 12 characters. So we're only left with 2 there, so that must mean that's 10 letters. And then that's spaced out so far. We've sort of right justified that. So we've moved this over a little bit and pushed it right to the end. So so the columns line up. So it's nice sort of in terms of accounting. We can see there apples, cups, and so on. If we change those numbers, so 20, right, we've sort of spaced it out. So now this would be 20 in total. We've basically left that the same. That's just going to move it over as much, right? If I went, 20 on this one, it's just going to be way over farther to the right. It kind of gets rid of that. So, the effectiveness of the dots. So bringing that over, I could even probably go to the 5, right? It does that. Obviously, if you had a little bit of a troubles, if your number was lower than the number of characters here, I don't know what would happen there. Yeah, it would just sort of start impinging on those other ones, right? So you just have to be a little careful there. But all it's doing here is printing it out kind of nicer, right? So that's another thing to keep in mind there. There's the explanation. Last little bit thing here is to talk about stripping white space. So if we want to remove white space, right, so basically spacing, we can do that with the strip methods. And so there's 3 of them: strip, right strip, and left strip, R and L. And you can see the examples right here. So I've got spaces on both sides of hello and world. And so this is useful just, if there's errant spacing, you can get rid of it. That's one thing here. And so I've got spam.strip. And so what it's done is you can see both the left and the right side have lost their white spaces. Makes sense. Left strip, it was going to remove it on the left side. So that's why it looks like there's, nothing there on the left, because there isn't. But if I sort of move my cursor over, you can see that the spacing is still there on the right side. And on this one, obviously we've removed the right side, we've stripped the white space from the right side, but the left side is still there and visible again. Okay, so that's, useful in removing any white spacing. You can also put an argument in, okay, so that parameter there lets you remove something. Now what's interesting is I've got spam, spam, bacon, spam, egg, spam, spam. And so what it's doing, obviously it's stripping, so remember it's only looking on the outside, okay? So it's only looking on the outside there. It won't remove the one here. You might say, well, what, Mr. Fleming, why did you spell it amps? Well, what's kind of neat is it does not matter. It could be spelled, the order could be in any way, okay? So it doesn't matter the order. So if I do this, right, well, you can actually see it there already. It's stripped away the spam and the bacon and eggs. What's kind of interesting, just play around with this. I can't remember if I get rid of that, just got apps, right? Then it left the M there. What did it do? Yeah, it just got rid of that one, right? It got rid of, didn't really do anything there, did it? Except it's put an M in front for some reason. Not sure why I did that. Anyways, it's kind of interesting because we got your spam, bacon, and eggs. So it didn't get rid of anything. Why that M is there? That's a good question. I'll try to figure that out. But we'll end the video here. We won't worry about the paperclip because that involves installing something, okay? We don't really need this at the moment. So I'm going to leave it here, and hopefully that gives you a good idea. I'm going to post these notes as well, and then there'll be some questions and a few challenges to go along with that. All right, so good luck with those.